Allie. Welcome back to the Entrepreneurs Podcast, the podcast for and by female entrepreneurs, hosted by the Entrepreneurs Network, a network for and by female entrepreneurs. Each week, we bring you stories of female entrepreneurs around the world as we kickstart our own entrepreneurial journeys together.
Today, we are delighted to have Christine, the Chief Education Strategy Officer at Handshake, a platform that helps college students get hired for jobs and internships.
Join us as we talk with Christine about her journey at Handshake and how she's committed to democratizing opportunities for college students, as well as the top tips of using Handshake.
Hello and welcome back to the Entrepreneurs Podcast. We are so excited today to have on a very special guest, Christine, the Chief Education Strategy Officer at Handshake. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you two doing?
Amazing. Thank you for asking. I love the energy today. We already chatted a little bit, and I think this is definitely going to be a good one. We always love to get started by asking, what is something that excites you when you wake up in the morning?
Ooh, what excites me when I wake up in the morning? There's so many things to be excited about. Honestly, I love my work. I genuinely love what I do. I love the mission of trying to help students jumpstart their careers and to get connected to jobs and internships that are actually meaningful to them. So that's certainly one piece. I'm very people oriented. So my team very much motivates me. I'm very excited about that when I wake up. I love food. So, I'm always thinking about all the meals that are upcoming for the day. And of course I love my family. So great to wake up and actually see them.
Absolutely. That's awesome. What's something delicious that you've eaten today so far?
Ooh, so I make a really good strawberry pie and I've been enjoying that this summer. So that was a nice little treat.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Amazing.
You'll have to share the recipe with us. Me and Allie, I think I can speak for the both of us, but strawberries are like top on our fruit list for sure. Allie does this really cute thing where if she loves something or she's expressing love, her way of doing that is by giving people fruit. And so whenever we chat and she loves something that I said, she'll send me little strawberry emojis, and it's the cutest thing ever.
I use it interchangeably with the red heart emoji. I'm like, there's a reason a strawberry looks like a red heart. It means love.
I love that.
That's how I interpret it. Yeah, amazing. So just to jump right into it, Chief Education Strategy Officer at Handshake. That is amazing. Both Waylon and I use Handshake as an amazing tool at our universities to find jobs, find meaningful internships, just as you mentioned. Tell me why you think this needs to be done today. Why is Handshake here? And why are you here in this role?
Yeah, the simple answer is that talent is distributed evenly, but unfortunately, opportunity is not. And so you have lots of students that go to lots of different universities, that come from lots of different places, that have families, some of whom don't have any connections. And unfortunately, the way our systems currently work mean that some are more disadvantaged than others. And if there is something that we can do to help democratize that opportunity, to help level that playing field, we want to do it. And so Handshake really grew out of a personal problem that our co-founders had. And it was to more evenly distribute the types of opportunities that were available to all of our students, and to do that in a way that was actually a systemic change, not just a programmatic change.
Totally.
I love that. I feel like listening to you say that really sparked something, and something really resonated with me, because I really looked at Handshake till this point as something that was just something to help students find jobs. But the fact that at its core, it's something to help make society a little bit more equal, I think is such a wonderful mission. In terms of how you got there, I would love to start. I know you didn't co-found Handshake, but we believe strongly that entrepreneurial spirit can be found pretty much anywhere. And so we would love to kind of reminisce on the first little inklings you had of your entrepreneurial spirit.
Sure. Well, okay. So the story actually of how I got to Handshake is an interesting one. So if you go back to 2014, our three co-founders, Garrett, Ben, and Scott, were all students at Michigan Tech. And at the time, I was a young professional at George Mason University. I was the assistant dean and executive director of career services at Mason at that point. Wow. I had just co-written an article on future trends in career services, and essentially had put out some predictions and some sort of thoughts on where I thought the field needed to go and what I thought higher education needed to do differently as it related to career services. Now, Garrett, our co-founder and CEO, found this article, and he, being an entrepreneur, was like, very interesting. Some of what they're talking about here touches on my experience as a student. I want to learn more. So he reached out to, at the time, my co-author, and through him ended up finding me. So we ended up doing an informational interview together when he was still a student, and he just wanted to learn more. Yeah, it was great. It was very, very interesting. He was so enthusiastic. He was just such a driven and ambitious student. And he was like, I want to tell you about my experience as a student. And I want you to tell me, is this a common experience? You've worked at multiple institutions. What does this look like for your students? And so we talked about it a little bit. And I was like, you know, some of the things you're talking about are not exactly the same, but there are some core principles of what you are experiencing that is similar, right? And it came down to this whole aspect of access. So Michigan Tech, I don't know if you're familiar with where it's located, but it is very far north in Michigan. So it's like 6 to 9 hours north of Detroit and Chicago. And they receive about 3 inches of snow a year. Okay. So you can imagine there aren't a lot of employers that are going to fly all the way up there and then drive, right, with all of that snow. And so as students, they were stuck with only the opportunities pretty much in the Midwest. The employers in the Midwest and in Michigan were the ones that would go to their school to recruit. But Garrett and many of his friends wanted to be able to have exposure to Silicon Valley tech companies, and they didn't. And so he was like, you know what, this doesn't really make sense. The old system are these closed enterprise systems that each school would purchase. And as a recruiter, you would have to log into all these different systems and post your jobs over and over and over and over again, which limited the number of schools that employers would post at. And so he's like, what if we made this into a network? What if we actually opened it up so all the schools kind of share all the employers, and it makes it easier for employers to be able to post at multiple schools? And so that was initially a system change that was very scary for a lot of folks because it was different than what they were used to. But now it's the norm. And every single school, including the ones that you two have gone to, or that you two go to, experienced over a 200 to 300% increase in the number of employers and opportunities that you now have available than before. So this all came out of a conversation that he had with me as a student. And at the time, I was getting ready to actually leave for Wellesley College, where I was the associate provost. When I got to Wellesley, I knew that I was going to overhaul career services and kind of redo the entire model. And one of the things that I brought was Handshake to Wellesley. So I was part of the first one that joined the network. And I've literally watched the company grow. So in 2018, end of 2018, when they reached out to me about possibly joining the team and joining the exec team, it seemed like a great opportunity to be able to continue leading change just in a very different scale and across multiple institutions.
That's amazing. Oh my goodness. I cannot even begin to start how inspiring that story is, and to know that you were kind of like the first one, like while it was being created. And also to learn that what we consider as normal of like, how do we find jobs? There's so many different platforms out there. There's Handshake, where the school, like one company will just post, and pretty much any school you go to, you can go on Handshake and you can create an application and log in. I can't believe there was a world where you couldn't do that. Like, it just doesn't seem right. So I'm so glad. I'm so glad that Handshake's done in.
No, Waylon, you're totally right. Especially with COVID, I feel like this was been like the meant to be 2-3 years before it, because frankly speaking, you're quite lucky if you go to a top 10, top 20, top 30, top 50, even top 100 university, because recruiters are going to go there. But what happens if you're in a top 500 and you're an ambitious student and you still want those applications? And as you mentioned, you don't have those connections. That's not fair. That's really not fair. You could be talented. You could be ambitious. You could be an awesome, awesome employee, but you just don't have those connections. And I think it's fantastic how Handshake is that bridge between that otherwise like space that you wouldn't be able to rent. And I think we see more and more networks doing this. My friend Cyril, he co-founded Landis, which allows people to eventually buy their houses, whereas before they would only be able to rent it, which is really amazing. I think we're seeing more and more of these opportunities that before were only available to the elite are now available to others. And it's a matter of this, as you said, talent is distributed evenly, but opportunities are not. And I think this really, really speaks to that in a powerful way. So like on that note of COVID, how has COVID transformed this? How has this shape doubled down on your strategy? Where does that stand?
So what COVID allowed us to do was actually accelerate some of the trends that we were already seeing happen. So prior to COVID, we already saw many of our employers start to shift towards a virtual strategy, right? And part of that was helping them to recognize that actually you can tap into more talent that has the skills and competencies you're looking for across more institutions if you have a digital first strategy. And so you started to see employers adopt this, but it was slow. And I would have said, if COVID had never happened, it probably would still take another 3 to 5 years before the majority of employers had some kind of digital strategy as part of their recruiting. COVID hit, all of a sudden, 3 to 5 years got condensed down to 3 to 5 months. And now everybody was trying this out, right? And I think what was so powerful was at Handshake, what we did was we pivoted very quickly in making sure that we were building out products that actually allowed for students and universities and employers to be able to connect virtually in a world where they could not literally get together physically. And over the course of this past year, we ended up helping to facilitate over 2,500 virtual fairs, over 2 million connections between students and employers. Those things wouldn't have happened without the platform. So we're really proud that those are the things we were able to bring together for students in particular. And now the employers have literally seen the benefits of what happens when you recruit virtually. You get more underrepresented students, you get more women students, you see more diversity in your pipeline. The benefits are very clear and are very there. And so now more and more companies actually have a virtual strategy.
That's amazing. And I think we've talked to a lot of founders who have obviously noted that COVID has impacted their businesses negatively, but have also been able to pivot in a way that if COVID had never happened, these things would have taken such a long time to build. Kind of switching gears slightly, I would love to know, you worked at universities for a really long time, and then this opportunity to work at Handshake came along, and that seemed like a really big jump from what you were doing before. How did you kind of make that career switch?
It was a huge jump. It was a huge switch to change industries, to change roles, to literally move my family from one side of the country all the way to the other side of the country. So every possible change you could imagine sort of happened all at once. For me, there were a few things that really helped make the decision. One was my belief in the company. I believe in the mission and the work and the value of why we stand to exist as a company. We're a for-profit organization and company, but certainly we have a double bottom line because we are mission driven in what we do, and that mattered to me. The second was really about scale and impact. So I realized working at an individual institution, I could have a real impact for the students there at one institution. But if I did my work correctly at a place like Handshake, I would be able to potentially have impact across thousands of institutions and millions of students. So the impact was
absolutely.
And then the last part was change management. I had discovered through my positions in higher education that I loved leading change. I love the challenge of getting buy-in and creating a vision that is exciting to others. And I knew that in this particular role, a huge piece of my job would be around change management, because as you all know, tech moves significantly faster than higher education. And when you sort of marry both roles, right, you have to do a lot of change management. So for me, those were some of the elements.
Yeah, I wanted to chat to you about that a little bit as well, because traditionally we think of tech as objectively like the fastest moving industry. Things are changing at such an accelerated rate. Just look at the bottom line, look at their growth, look at their stock prices. But then you look at education or higher institution, on the other hand, particularly universities, and at least surface level, it seems that things happen very slowly, very bureaucratic. So how do you merge those two, and tell us, where are those strings of entrepreneurship and those creative new ideas, future ways of education within higher education? Because from a surface level thing, it seems like for your education, you do your courses, things are the same, but where that starts somewhere and things evolve over time. We don't see it, but it happens over time, things change. So what are those changes and how does it happen?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, let me tackle the first part of your question, which is sort of how do you bring those two? How do you bring those together? I think the biggest sort of sometimes most underrated aspect that people don't often acknowledge is the power of language. So language is something that can be used to bring people together. You feel a sense of community, right? When you have the lingo, when you have the slang, when you know the words, you know the right acronyms, right? People are like, oh, okay, she gets me. She gets this field. She gets this area. Oh, she's from around where I grew up, right? Like you get that feeling. Now, language can also be used for the opposite reason. It can be used to exclude people, right? How frequently have you possibly, or other women entrepreneurs that are trying to break into the field, didn't use the right business acronyms, didn't use the right jargon, and it made it hard for them to pitch to an investor, or it made it hard for them to get credibility with somebody, right? So language can be used to include, or it can be used to exclude. And I think
totally right.
Right. And when you think about that, what's really interesting is that often people are talking about really similar concepts. They just use very different language to describe it. So if you take a startup, let's take tech, right? We talk about profit margin. We talk about revenue. We talk about our investors, right? As an example. In higher education, they don't use those words, but they have net tuition dollars. They have tuition. They have a board of trustees. They have donors, right? These are fairly similar concepts in terms of the money that's coming in or being raised or being donated or given, right? And what you have to think about. So if you're able to listen past the jargon and you can really ask questions and be curious, genuinely curious about where somebody is coming from, you have an opportunity to actually redefine what that relationship looks like. And when people feel like you understand them, or you're willing to try and understand them, they're more willing to try and understand you. And so that's a lot of the work that we do, is building that trust and that rapport and that relationship, so that in fact, we are able to help present those new ideas and to actually move some of those things forward.
I love that. I think that your idea of languages being both inclusive and exclusive, I think Ali and I both resonate with that, especially as women who are trying to break into entrepreneurship, who are trying to break into VC. I started a summer internship at a VC firm, and my boss gave me a list of words, and she was like, these are words that I didn't know when I first started. And these took me literally 10 to 15 years to learn, because nobody sat down with me and told me like, hey, to break into this industry, this is what you need to know. And so just giving the space and the opportunity to tell students that it's not because you're not capable of a job or not capable of breaking in. It's just that there's these words that you need to learn, and I can help teach you these words to help you break into those spaces. So I definitely resonate with this idea of languages being both celebrated, but also a lot of work needs to be done to make them less exclusive.
That's right.
I would love to learn more about how we did a little LinkedIn stalking, as we do. I would love to learn how you were able to take what you learned from your degree in psychology and family studies into going into career services and now into Handshake too.
Yeah, for sure. So you might think there's not a lot that is directly related, but what I would actually say is that there's so much more that actually is sort of connected that most people don't think about. So one of the reasons I studied psychology is because I'm fascinated by people. I'm fascinated by how people think, by how they behave, what they're motivated by, what inspires them, what creates behavior, both at an individual level as well as at a group level, right? And all of that is used literally every single day in my role as a leader. So I lead an organization of multiple teams with upwards of, we're somewhere between 70 to 80 people alone just on my team. Our organization has a little over 350 individuals. And it is amazing how every single day I end up using my understanding of psychology and what makes people tick and what makes them move or behave in the way that they do to help provide feedback, to help align people and motivate folks towards a common goal, to get folks excited and accountable at the same time, right? So like the nuances of managing and leading a team and of being able to be a good supervisor and actually grow and develop your people so that they can be leaders, so that they can go on to do more things, all comes from psychology. The family studies is interesting too, from the perspective of group dynamics, right? So just as a family has lots of dynamics. So do all organizations or teams that you're on. And being able to understand those dynamics can help you then navigate them, and also to create better, more healthy patterns within the organization that you're in. And I would say the psychology piece also plays in very heavily around the change management with our external partners. So Alexandra, sorry, I called you your full name. Allie, you had asked a question earlier around like, what are some of the new things that are sort of happening or might be coming in through higher education? And the change management piece is a really big one, because you're right, they don't change as easily or as fast as tech does. And so as we look into the future and we look at stackable credentials, as you look at skills-based learning, as you think about some of those new aspects of how higher education is going to have to both think about their revenue source, as well as how they prepare students for the world of work, those are some of the components that we get the chance to actually help create buy-in, create vision, get folks excited about some of those elements and how they can still have a role in it. And psychology is used to sort of help create that buy-in and help to alleviate some of the fear of change.
Out of curiosity, where do you see the intersections and how psychology plays into the entrepreneurial spirit? The psychology of someone who's a little more entrepreneurial, a little more creative thinking. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's so much that can be, this is kind of a nature versus nurture debate, if you will. I think to some extent, there are some folks that are really born with this innate curiosity and desire to constantly be looking for new answers, new solutions, trying to understand the problems that exist around them in their everyday world. I also think a lot of that can be cultivated by your environment and by your parents and by your family or your friends that are around you, right? The ability, I think lots of people are naturally curious up to a certain age. And then you start to learn through school, unfortunately, that sometimes there are answers, there are like right answers to things, right? And sometimes kids lose a little bit of that curiosity. But when it comes to asking questions, that is actually something that can be learned. You can learn to be a good question asker. You can learn how to break things down and look at things from different angles and different perspectives. And so even if you might not be the most naturally curious person, you can actually learn to ask better questions. And so I think that part of it does have an impact on sort of your environment around you, because if you're surrounded by people who are constantly asking questions, constantly looking at things from a different angle or perspective, getting inspiration from different fields, you're more likely to then also do something similar simply because of exposure.
Absolutely. That's so wonderful. Oh my goodness. I love that. I love that so much. So how do you see questions play a role in Handshake as well? Like asking questions on interviews, coming to Handshake, what are best practices for Handshake? What college students who are listening to this podcast, what can they take away? Top tips for handshakes and getting jobs and using their curiosity to their advantage rather than, oh no, I feel like they'll think I'm an idiot if I don't know the answers, I don't know the jargon. What's the reality?
Yeah, not at all. I think the more you can show curiosity, the more you can ask questions, actually, the smarter you will be, and also the more humble you will be, right? People want to work with someone who isn't a know-it-all. They want to work with people who don't, they already have all the answers. So the fact that you're asking questions, I think also shows a level of self-security that you have in yourself. And that is a really important trait to be able to showcase to potential employers. So a few things that I would encourage you to do on Handshake. One is make sure you actually create your account. Okay, so first thing, like actually go there. Second thing, make sure you complete your profile. This is particularly important. So when a student completes their profile, they are 80% more likely to get a message from an employer. 80% more likely. That is huge. So you're like literally leaving opportunities on the table if you don't fill out your profile. So complete your profile, tell us what job roles you're interested in, what job types you're interested in, what industries you want to go to, the types of experiences or skills or coursework you've done. All of that is super helpful because it helps an employer to actually search for you. So that's really important. The second thing after that is actually go find peers and initiate conversation. So you can do peer messaging on Handshake. So you can actually find folks at your own institution or at any other Handshake institution. And you could find somebody that maybe has your major, or you could find other students who are in the same student groups as you, right? Like you can look for different things to sort of see who you want to find and talk to. And I would encourage you to just start with simple conversation. Allie, hi, I'm a student at so-and-so. I would love to learn more about your interest in entrepreneurship. Like, tell me how you got this interest and what have you been learning? Maybe I'm talking to Waylon. What jargon have you learned recently? I would love to learn more. Can I get that list? Right? Like, definitely find ways to just talk to people and learn more about their experience. And then one of the new things that we're rolling out this fall is an opportunity for students to connect directly with recruiters. So when you're looking at an open job, some of the recruiters are going to be offering virtual one-on-one info sessions. So that you could just click on it and say like, oh, Christine, I'm interested in a job at Handshake. I would love to learn more about Handshake. Could I just chat with you for 15 minutes? And do that. So take advantage of those opportunities to have those conversations and ask questions.
That's amazing.
Amazing. I love it.
Yeah, I think this is such a great opportunity. Actually, my sister, she studies biology, but she's not looking into going in like the traditional path of biology where you like become a researcher. And she's always asking me like, where do I find more people who are like me, who like studied biology at college, but didn't necessarily want to go into just research? And so I'll definitely be directing her to talk to some recruiters this fall, to students who have done a similar thing. That's amazing. I would also love to learn a little bit more about you. What were your interests when you were younger, before college, and how did you kind of get to where you are now? Like, where did this passion for equity, where did this passion for psychology start?
Yeah, well, my interest for psychology started in high school. So I was always really interested in people, generally speaking. I was good at talking to people. People seemed to trust me and would want to tell me things. I was always fascinated by sort of like people or relationship dynamics. So when I had the opportunity to take a psychology class and then AP psychology, I found that I was just so immersed in the actual school of thought that I was learning, in all of the different theories that we had a chance to be exposed to. Everything was like very fascinating to me. And I was more interested in that topic than I was in probably any other subject in school. And so I knew that that was a potential area that I would want to study when I went to college. I chose it when I went to college, thinking that I was going to study that, get a minor in family studies, go on to get my PhD in family and marriage therapy, and become a family and marriage counselor. Like, that's what I thought I was going to do.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And then junior year rolled around. I started looking at grad schools and started worrying that I was going to go, 5-6 years of grad school and then not want to listen to people's marital problems for 40 years. Right. And then I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do then? And so I was very involved in undergrad. I did orientation, I did student activities, I did psychology peer advising, all that kind of good stuff. And I went to my mentors. I went to the people that ran those programs. And I said, I thought this is what I wanted to do. And now I'm second guessing myself and I'm not sure. But I don't have time to change my major. Like I'm on loans. I can't like stay an extra year. I need to like graduate. And they were like, you don't need to change your major, just finish your major, but think about other ways that you could apply your psychology degree. And they suggested maybe working in higher education. And they were like, you can still use your counseling skills and your helping skills with students, just in a very different setting. So instead of married people, it'll be students that you'll essentially And so I was like,
that's so amazing.
And that's essentially what led me into higher education. And you already know the story for what led me from higher ed to Handshake. So that was sort of it.
That's amazing. Wow. It's so cool to see how everything kind of worked out in that setting. Before we wrap up, I'd love to ask one more question about you in terms of like how it all kind of played together. What do you wish you knew like 5-10 years ago when you were starting off in higher education, that whole thing, before you really took the leap into entrepreneurship? And what advice would you have for someone else who's maybe in a more traditionally institutional business or role and is now given the opportunity to do something a little more entrepreneurial, take the plunge? What advice would you have for them and yourself?
Yeah. Look, the biggest advice I would give myself is to actually challenge myself and immerse myself in the subjects that I don't find as interesting. So I'm someone who really I jumped in hard when it was interesting. I was like, love people, taking all those classes, love psychology, taking all those classes, team dynamics, org dynamics, org dimensions, taking all those classes, public speaking, love it. I'll take those classes. But when it came to business, when it came to economics, when it came to finance, I didn't take any of those classes because I was like, I don't need that. I'm not interested. I'll never use that, right? I'm going to go into a helping profession. And the reality is, guess what I'm doing now? I'm running a third of the business. And I needed that knowledge. I needed that information. And I've obviously learned it on the job, and that is possible to do. But it's harder. It's a lot harder. So I'm now in my, mid to late 30s. I have a family. I'm juggling a lot. I have a very demanding position. And I'm also at the same time learning all of those aspects that for many of you, you still have an opportunity to learn while you're a full-time student. So I encourage you to think about whatever you are actually not so good at. I encourage you to still get exposure to. So maybe you're someone who's like really into economics, or you're really into finance, you're really into business, and you've taken all those classes, but you haven't actually taken any classes in psychology, or you haven't taken the time to do public speaking or to really understand people. I encourage you to actually take some time to take those classes too, so that you're a slightly more well-rounded. I think that really helps in just giving you additional perspective. And quite frankly, to what Waylon said earlier, it gives you exposure to the jargon and to the acronyms that will be extremely helpful to you.
Yeah, I resonate with that completely. This fall, I'm going head first into a finance class, and I'm nervous because it's not something that I feel super comfortable in. It's like a financial investments class, just like a basic class. But I told myself, like, it's okay if I don't love it, but I know it's like just helpful for me to know for the future. So yeah, definitely encourage all our listeners to do something similar. But as we begin to wrap up the podcast, we love to ask our guests, what is something that you loved about yourself today?
Oh, that is a question I have never been asked before. What is one thing that I love about myself today?
Yeah, what is one thing you love about yourself today?
I love my capacity to be a good friend and to be there for people when they really need it. I have a former teammate that is going through a really hard time right now.
Yeah.
And just being able to spend even 30 minutes with her on the phone, to hear her out, to validate her feelings, and to help her see the possibilities and the impact that she's having even during this sort of tough and dark time, meant a lot to me.
See, you are still helping people in that way. Isn't that funny? You get to do both.
It's true.
Yeah, similarly, what is something that you are grateful for today?
Oh, I am particularly grateful for the people in my life. I am very fortunate to have some friends and lifelines, and just individuals who are always real with me and believe in me more than I often believe in myself, and not only lift me up, but keep me grounded. So I'm very grateful.
Totally. It's amazing.
I love it. And then to end us off, what does it mean to be an entrepreneur?
Oh, these are such good questions. I love this. I think being an entrepreneur is about being able to see possibilities that others can't yet see, right? And so you've identified, lots of people in the world have identified problems, but you've taken the next step in trying to propose a solution. And I think entrepreneurs are unafraid of the fact that people might not believe in it, might not believe in that idea, might not believe in them. And I shouldn't say unafraid. I think actually fear is quite motivating for a lot of people. But I think you don't let that fear stop you from being able to move forward. Lots of people have ideas. And really, I think the main difference between entrepreneurs and lots of people is that you actually keep pushing forward that particular idea.
Totally.
So
totally. It's like getting out of as you said, the family counseling office sometimes, and getting your problems off your chest. You're like, okay, great. So what are we going to do to fix it now? I've done all my complaining. I know what the problem is. Now let's find a solution.
Exactly.
And for our audience who want to continue to follow your journey and continue to follow Handshake and all of your exciting opportunities there, how can they do that?
Yes. Okay. So first, if you want to follow me, my Twitter handle and on LinkedIn is C Cruzvergara. So my first initial and my last name. You can find me there. Please feel free. I also encourage you to follow Handshake. It's at Join Handshake, and that's the same for Twitter. You can obviously find us on LinkedIn and on Instagram and TikTok as well. So definitely follow us there. And as a student, if you have not already downloaded the Handshake app, please go to the App Store and do that as well, so that you can actually get into the platform and use it.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Coming on today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a pleasure.
That wraps it up for today's podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you learned a lot about Christine and Handshake.
Great thanks to Wynn and Kathleen as our podcast producers too.
Check out our past episodes and look out for our upcoming episodes featuring inspiring female entrepreneurs through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to your podcast now.
To stay updated and involved, join the Entrepreneurs Network community on our Instagram and LinkedIn and get in touch with us to share your very own entrepreneurial journey.